In 1965, the future was on display at the New York World's Fair. People lined up to see computer modems. Electric toothbrushes were considered miracles. And General Motors had built a massive pavilion called Futurama 2, showcasing future cities, flying cars, and colonized oceans. But one of the most eye-catching attractions wasn't inside the pavilion. It was parked outside, a white, glossy fiberglass machine. It looked like a truck, but it wasn't. The Chevrolet Turbo Titan III. At first glance, it was hard to make sense of what you were seeing. There was no steering wheel. Instead, there were two small control dials, like something out of a spaceship. A panoramic glass roof. From the cockpit, you could look straight up at the sky. The cab could electrically tilt forward, giving access to the engine. And the engine itself wasn't normal. It was a jet engine. More precisely, a gas turbine. The GM GT309, the result of 15 years of research. Power, 280 horsepower torque, 875 pounds-feet at idle. RPM, 35,000, reduced to 4,000 RPM at the output shaft. While a modern diesel truck engine operates at around 1,800 to 2,100 RPM, the Turbo Titan's turbine was spinning at 35,000 RPM. GM engineers called it the truck of tomorrow. And in that moment, everyone believed it, because the 1960s were the jet age. Airplanes flew with jet engines. Trains ran on turbines. So why shouldn't trucks be turbine-powered too? That was the thinking behind the Turbo Titan III. But not every idea becomes reality, because the Turbo Titan III had a secret, a terrifying secret, and that secret was heat. Before we get into the details, there's something you need to understand. Under this video, you'll see a subscribe button, a small action with a big meaning. A simple subscription tells me these words reached you. It tells me that the effort, the late nights, and the discipline to bring this message forward mattered to someone on the other side of the screen. Thank you, and let's get into the details. In the early 1950s, General Motors became obsessed with gas turbine engines. Firebird 1, Firebird 2, Firebird 3. Sleek, futuristic concept cars powered by turbine engines. But turbine-powered cars had a problem. They were too delicate, too expensive, not built for the real world. So GM asked a different question. What about trucks? Trucks were different. Trucks needed torque to haul heavy loads, and turbines were torque monsters. Think about it. A conventional diesel engine uses pistons to produce power. Pistons move up and down, creating vibration and wear over time. A turbine has no pistons, only rotating components. They pull in air, compress it, ignite it, and generate power. In theory, it was perfect. Fewer parts equals fewer failures. Lighter weight equals more payload. Quieter operation equals better driver comfort. More power equals climbing mountains with ease. And most importantly, turbines could run on almost any fuel, gasoline, diesel, kerosene, jet fuel. It didn't matter. GM engineers had been testing turbine technology since the 1950s. Turbo Titan 1, 1950s. Standard truck chassis with a turbine. Turbo Titan 2, early 1960s. Improved turbine design. GM Bison, 1964. A massive twin-turbine truck, 280 horsepower primary, plus 700 horsepower auxiliary. And then, in 1965, came the Turbo Titan III. This wasn't just a test vehicle. It was a showpiece. Designed by Bill Mitchell, the man behind the Corvette Stingray, it was a rolling work of art. The fiberglass and steel cab tilted forward electrically for engine access. The headlights were hidden, retracting into the body when not in use. The chassis was completely enclosed. No exposed components, just a smooth white surface. Inside, it felt like a spacecraft. Suspension-mounted seats with headrests, astronaut style, FM stereo radio, two-way radio telephone, air conditioning. And then there was the twin-dial steering system. Two small dials. Instead of a steering wheel, turn the right dial to go right, the left dial to go left. The Turbo Titan III wasn't just a truck. It was a desire, a vision of the future. This is our future, GM said, and the future runs on turbines. But the real world doesn't behave the way it does on paper. On paper, the Turbo Titan III was perfect. But in reality, piston engines burn fuel in short bursts. Burn to cool, to burn to cool. Turbines don't. Inside a turbine, there is a continuous flame. Every second. Uninterrupted. Air flows in, gets compressed, ignited, and expelled endlessly. The temperature inside the GT309 turbine reached 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to melt steel. GM engineers knew this. That's why they added a regenerator to reduce exhaust temperatures. As a result, the exhaust temperature dropped to 300 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So, problem solved? No, because 300 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit was still extremely hot. To put that into perspective, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, meat cooks at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, asphalt softens at 250 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Even after cooling, the Turbo Titan 3's exhaust measured 300 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is where the real problem began. On the highway, there was no issue. The truck kept moving. The exhaust dispersed into the air. The heat spread out. But what happened at a red light? The truck stopped. The turbine kept running, even at idle, spinning at 18,000 to 35,000 RPM. Exhaust continued to pour out. And the heat, a pool of 400 degrees Fahrenheit exhaust gas, formed just inches above the ground. The plastic bumper of the car behind it began to melt. The asphalt softened. Just like Union Pacific's gas turbine locomotives, those trains ran so hot that they changed the color of the rails, set railroad ties on fire, melted asphalt beneath bridges. In one case, Union Pacific was built by a city because a turbine-powered train melted the road near a station. That was the fate of the Turbo Titan 3, but it was even worse. Trains ran on rails, relatively isolated, far from people. Trucks operated in cities, at traffic lights, surrounded by cars, pedestrians, and buildings. And a 400 degrees Fahrenheit exhaust plume in that environment wasn't innovation. It was a disaster. But heat wasn't even the biggest problem. The real issue was money, fuel economy. Gas turbine engines have a critical flaw. They burn fuel like they're at full throttle, even at idle. Why? Because a turbine must keep spinning. When a diesel truck waits at a red light, it idles at 700 to 900 RPM, sipping fuel, minimal consumption. A turbine, on the other hand, spins at 18,000 to 35,000 RPM, even at idle, and spinning requires fuel. GM engineers claimed that on the highway, the Turbo Titan 3 was nearly as efficient as a diesel. At a steady 65 miles per hour, fuel economy was almost identical. But in city traffic, it was a disaster. Stop-and-go driving, red lights, traffic jams. Every time the truck stopped, the turbine kept running, burning fuel while the truck wasn't moving. Fuel consumption skyrocketed, just like Union Pacific's turbine locomotives. In the 1950s, Union Pacific's turbines made sense because fuel was cheap. Oil companies produced a heavy, low-grade fuel called Bunker C, and UP used it in their turbines. 1 gallon of Bunker C cost 50 cents, but by the 1970s, the oil crisis hit. Fuel prices increased tenfold. Overnight, turbine power turned into economic suicide. Union Pacific scrapped all of them. 55 locomotives, millions of dollars, gone. The Turbo Titan 3 faced the same fate. GM spent 15 years researching turbines, millions of dollars invested. The Firebirds, the Turbo Titans, the GM Bison. All of it was a bet on turbine technology. But in the end, math won. Engineers could solve the heat problem, but no one could justify the fuel bill. And by the late 1960s, something else happened. The Clean Air Act. In the 1970s, environmental regulations arrived. Emission standards became law. Turbines weren't clean. Continuous combustion meant continuous emissions. For these reasons, GM canceled the project. So what happened to the Turbo Titan 3? No one knows. By the late 1960s, the truck disappeared. According to the GM Heritage Center, we don't know where it went. It was most likely destroyed. That's usually the fate of concept vehicles. If they don't end up in a museum, they're crushed, dismantled, forgotten. Ford Big Red, still alive, in a private collection, still shining. But Turbo Titan 3? Lost. Today, only a few photographs remain, a handful of videos, one promotional film, and that's it. The truck of the future was buried in the sands of history. Just like Union Pacific's turbines, only 30 of 55 locomotives still exist, rusting away in museums. Just like the Burley T100, only one of 4 survives, forgotten in a museum. The Turbo Titan III? None survived. But the turbine dream didn't end with Turbo Titan. Ford kept fighting. In 1971, Ford opened a turbine factory in Toledo and began producing the Ford 707 turbine. 375 horsepower, improved regenerator, better fuel economy. Ford installed the 707 turbine in several productions, trucks. They ran for years between Dearborn and Toledo. Had the future finally arrived? No. In 1973, the factory closed because 2 problems were still unsolved. Cooling, turbines were still too hot. Production cost, turbines were still too expensive. Those 2 issues ended the turbine dream, even for Ford. Today, not a single production truck runs on a turbine engine. Sometimes engineering goes too far. Sometimes technology moves faster than the world around it. The Turbo Titan III is 280 horsepower, proof of that reality. On paper, it was perfect. Fewer parts, lighter, more powerful. But in the real world, too hot. An exhaust that melted asphalt. Too hungry. Burning fuel at idle. Too expensive. Production costs. Too dirty. Emissions regulations. The Turbo Titan III was the right idea at the wrong time. If fuel had stayed cheap forever in the 1960s, maybe turbines would have won. If emissions regulations had never arrived, maybe turbines would have survived. But the world changed. The oil crisis came. Environmental awareness followed. And turbines were left behind as a historical footnote. Like steam locomotives, like cab-over trucks, like the Burley T100. Sometimes the most magnificent machines are the ones forgotten the fastest. In 1965, at the World's Fair, thousands of people gathered around the Turbo Titan III. Children stared up at the glass canopy, shouting, "A spaceship!" Adults listened to the turbine's high-pitched jet whine, the sound of the future. GM engineers were proud. "This is the truck of tomorrow," they said. And for that moment everyone believed, but tomorrow never came. The Turbo Titan III was a promise that was never kept. It was a vision of the future, but the future chose a different path. Because sometimes technology isn't enough. Sometimes physics is ruthless. Sometimes economics wins. The Turbo Titan III teaches us this. Even the brightest ideas fade when they collide with the real world. Today, if you look through old GM photographs in a museum, you might see it. White, glossy, futuristic, frozen in the 1960s. A glass-roofed, astronaut-seated, asphalt-melting monument to a future that never arrived. Chevrolet Turbo Titan III. So hot it melted asphalt at traffic lights, and so futuristic that its time never came.